Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 48 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. Today we meet for 2 hours with the sponsors of Bill C-224 and Bill S-203. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022. The folks that are online are well aware of the rules of hybrid proceedings. Just a reminder that please don't take any screenshots or photos of your screen. The proceedings today will be made available on the House of Commons website. The tests have been conducted for those participating online, and everything is functioning in terms of audio and video. It is now my absolute pleasure to finally welcome Sherry Romanato, who has joined us today to talk about her private member's Bill C-224, an act to establish a national framework for the prevention and treatment of cancers linked to firefighting. Ms. Romanato, thank you so much for clearing your schedule to be able to be with us here today. I invite you to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Bonjour, good morning. Colleagues, I'll be making my remarks in both official languages, so for anyone requiring interpretation, you may want to put on your headsets. Mr. Chair, I'm honored to be here today to speak about my private member's Bill C-224. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, whose president is here with us today, as well as the International Association of Firefighters for their collaboration and their wise counsel in the preparation of this bill. Canada has an estimated 126,000 firefighters working in some 3,200 fire departments across the country. Each and every day, these brave men and women put their lives on the line to protect their fellow Canadians and keep our communities safe. We all recognize that the work these emergency responders do is essential, and that their job is dangerous, but the larger risks that they face in the line of duty, they linger long after the fire has been put out. Exposition à la fumée et aux produits chimiques toxiques.
Due to exposure and smoke and toxic chemicals, firefighters are 4 times more likely to develop cancer compared to the general public.
As parliamentarians, to do everything in our power to protect the health and safety of our firefighters. This bill seeks to do just that, Mr. Chair. Its goal, in short, is to save lives. Are you aware that over 85% of all duty-related deaths among Canadian firefighters are caused by occupational cancers? Or that a firefighter's cancer diagnosis may or may not be recognized as job-related, depending on where he or she lives in the country? Ce projet de loi a été inspiré par un pompier de service.
This bill was inspired by a firefighter from the greater city of Longueuil who contacted me in 2018 following a cancer diagnosis linked to his service. He wanted to make me aware about the risks, the increased risks of firefighters face every day, and the fact that he had colleagues who had a cancer that has been recognized by other provinces as being linked to the fight against fires, but not in Quebec.
My bill, I was shocked to discover the disparity in the number of cancers that our provinces and territories recognize as linked to firefighting, as you can see in the map before you. Multiple studies have shown that firefighters are at an increased risk for different types of cancer due to the smoke and hazardous chemicals they are exposed to in the line of duty. In June of this year, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer reclassified firefighting as a Group 1 carcinogenic profession. So the research is there. We need to promote awareness, information sharing, and education on best practices for prevention and recognize that occupational cancers in firefighting exists. And that is where Bill C-224 comes in. Imagine, Mr. Chair, if we could share information on best practices, data, and research so all firefighters across Canada know the risks and, more importantly, how to take the necessary precautions. Le but de ce projet de loi est de promouvoir.
The purpose of this bill is to promote education and awareness raising by designating January as being the Firefighter Cancer Awareness Month.
To promote research information and knowledge sharing relating to the prevention and treatment of cancers linked to firefighting. Countless local fire departments across the country have reached out to me to voice their support for the legislation and to aim to working together across all jurisdictions to improve the health and safety of Canada firefighters. Plusieurs conseils municipaux, donc celui de la municipalité.
Several city councils, including St. Donat and the regional municipality of Matawini, have adopted a resolution in order to support Bill C-2024.
Fallen firefighter memorial service I attended on September 11th of this year. The family of Fire Chief Leo Grant Cebulski of the Chetwynd Volunteer Fire Department in BC, who had succumbed to cancer linked to his service, said this, and I quote, "Throughout the years, I was prepared for the possibility of a disaster involving explosion, collapsing buildings or falls. I never imagined that his life would be cut short through slow, continuous exposure while doing the very thing that he loved the most. It is my hope that monumental progress will be made to protect our young firefighters from making the ultimate sacrifice in such a terrible way." Colleagues, firefighter line of duty deaths attributed to cancer may not be as sensational as those caused by fireground accidents, and they may not make the same headlines, but the level of sacrifice is just the same. And firefighters and their families need to know the risks, how to mitigate their chances of developing cancer through best practices, and should they develop an occupational-related cancer, have the supports they need and that they deserve. I look forward to your questions. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ms. Romanato. We're now going to begin with rounds of questions, starting with the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Mr. Lewis, welcome to the committee. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. An honor to be here this morning, first time on Health Committee, and probably one of the most unique opportunities for me as a member of Parliament to truly bring some experience to committee. And so with that, I will first and foremost say congratulations to Ms. Romanato. I'm so incredibly proud of you on so many fronts. You represent both volunteers and professional firefighters. As far as I'm concerned, they're the exact same. Smoke is smoke and fire is fire. And so I want to say thank you so much for bringing this very well thought out bill forward, a bill that I not only completely endorse, but I believe is so vitally important. And so I probably won't have a lot of questions for Ms. Romanato, but I do want to share a couple of stories. So over the last 5 weeks, I was at the Kingsville Retirees. I was part of the Kingsville Fire Department, and I was at their retiree dinner. And I ran into a gentleman by the name of Mr. Vokes, Art Vokes. Served 32 years. He just retired about 2 years ago. 2 months ago. And Mr. Vokes shared a story with me in that he had no idea he was walking around with prostate cancer. And he did give me the permission to tell this story this morning. So he had no clue. And I didn't know this till this morning. So generally speaking, men are 0 to 5 prostate. He was at 19.1, Ms. Romanato. So he was basically walking dead what the doctors told him. Thank goodness, the doctors removed his prostate and saved his life. And he said, Chris, I think testing should be done for firefighters every 5 years, both firefighters that are working today and also the retirees. And that's just one example. The second example I would give why this bill, C-224, is so vitally important. I was at the Windsor Fire Retirees dinner a month ago, and I sat next to the chief health officer, and he said, Chris, are you aware that now Parkinson's disease has been linked to firefighting? I said, I had no idea, right? And so the very folks that we rely on, that we scream for help, when the cat's caught in a tree, pardon the pun, our house is burning, or somebody is dying of a medical emergency, we're the exact same ones that go out there and run run to the assistance, and do it with service. No different than this House, right? And these are the same folks that I'm going to suggest are too embarrassed to even say that they're struggling through this, that they're fighting these illnesses. And if we can, at the very, very least, make January Firefighter Awareness Month, specifically to cancers, oh my goodness, that's about the biggest slam dunk in the whole world. I guess my question would be, through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Romanato, and I don't want to stall this bill. As a matter of fact, I wish this bill was done 8 months ago. Can I ask you, is there something else in this bill that you would like to see, perhaps, that would enhance even further your bill?
I know Christmas is coming, MP Lewis, and I think firefighters across the country want to see parliamentarians come together, as we have on this bill, to get this done. And so in terms of what would I like to see in this bill, I would like to see this bill passed for them. And I didn't say thank you. Thank you for your service, but also thank you for standing by me on this one and giving me counsel on this one as a firefighter. I want to thank you for that, because while my father was a firefighter and my husband was a firefighter, I did not serve. I'm a family of one, but having that firsthand experience and counsel has been enormously helpful for me, and I appreciate everything that you've done to help me on this bill. So if I had anything to ask for Christmas, it would be that this bill gets reported back to the House before we rise.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time left, please, sir?
1 minute.
Thank you. And I'll just wrap up my thoughts here. So I'm gonna build on Ms. Romanato with regard to family. And so firefighters, we can't do this by ourselves. We come home from I'm going to say a long day's work, which everybody does, but carrying a whole bunch of stress and a huge load in our minds and our hearts. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'm proud to say it, because if I don't talk about it, then shame on me, right? I still get reoccurring dreams about car accidents that I've been to and you know, folks that we've pulled out of fires. So I'm not embarrassed to say it. It's the truth. The awareness that we are trying to pass here, specifically to mental illness, is there something else that maybe a new private member's bill or something else that we can do to support our firefighters, our families, but not just specifically to the firefighter themselves, but to the husbands and wives that have to live with firefighters, that have to sleep with firefighters, that wake up because, quite frankly, some of us are having nightmares. Is there something else that you can see? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I would say to that, I was very, very happy to be one of the first members of the government to support C-211, Todd Doherty's private member's bill in the 42nd Parliament with respect to PTSD for first responders. And I think showing cross-party support for PTSD for those who respond, whether it be military, firefighters, police, emergency responders, is vital. And I think we've demonstrated we can work together to get things done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Romanato. Next, Mr. Vancouverden, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sherry. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your work on this. Thank you for being a champion for people like your father and your husband, but for over 100,000 firefighters across the country, people who have served, people who are serving, and people who will serve. Firefighting is, you know, I'm going to rank them, but one of the most important roles in our communities. They don't just put out fires, they're always there for us, whether it's a car accident or a cat in the tree, as Mr. Lewis said. Whatever it is, firefighters are heroes. And I'm very proud of all of my friends, lots of paddlers, lots of people that used to do sport. I chatted about this the other night at the reception about how many people that used to do sport gravitate towards a team environment and want to keep supporting their community members. And I didn't know that that firefighting was linked to so many chronic illnesses until I was 17 years old. And when I was 17, I was here in Ottawa and the national championships were here, and there was an award for a new trophy, and it was called the Jean Fernel Trophy. Jean Fernel was an amazing Olympian in my sport, and has 2 kids who I got to go to the Olympics with a couple of times, Erg and Emily, but Jean died from leukemia, way too young. He's a firefighter. He's also a Montreal Olympian. He got to go to the Olympics at home. Amazing guy. My coach went to the Olympics with him, and he said his arms were the size of his legs. Incredible guy. And I remember back in 1999, here in Ottawa, sitting on that podium, listening to the announcer talk about Jean and the long story, because we get the long version of it when the trophy is awarded the first time, and we just sat there and we cried. Cried with these 2 little kids. I think they were 10 and 12 at the time, Emily and Eric, and then who we didn't know, but 9 years later we're going to be at the Olympics together. So Emily and Eric are 2 of my closest friends, and I never got to know their dad, Jean, but lots of stories, and he was an amazing guy. This past weekend in Milton, I attended the celebration of life for James Finn. Jim Finn was born and raised in Milton, and he spent his entire life giving back to the community, and he worked for the town of Milton operations department for over 44 years, and for a lot of that time we only had volunteer firefighters, but he served alongside the brave men and women in the Milton Fire Department for 47 years. We didn't really get into the specifics of James's illness, but he died from cancer at the age of 76, and he leaves behind his wonderful kids, and this is a big family, okay? Like his nephew taught me in high school. Like this is a big family. A lot of teachers, a lot of firefighters. So we know that firefighters quite literally take their homework with them, or their work home with them. When I visited the fire station, the new fire station, with Chief Gatto in Milton a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to talk to some firefighters about this bill, and they told me, more than I'd ever knew was possible about how many dangerous chemicals are involved in the field of firefighting, about how much contamination is on their uniforms when they get off the job and coming back from a work site, from putting out a fire and being around noxious chemicals, and how much is probably on their clothes when they go home too. I know you have a lot to say about this bill. We've talked about it a lot, so I'm just going to open the floor to you. I know you've got more to say than you had the time to say. I just want to say thank you to you, your staff, and everybody that helped, and the firefighters that provided such great advice and recommendations to this bill. This bill is going to change and save lives. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Adam. And one thing you mentioned, and I want to be clear, and Chris also, sorry, I'm going to use your first names because we're all colleagues here. I want to be really clear. Whether a career, a volunteer, or on call, a firefighter is a firefighter is a firefighter, and they are exposed to the same chemicals. And so I want to be clear that this bill covers all firefighters. Indigenous firefighters, firefighters in the Canadian Armed Forces, firefighters across Canada. Because cancer doesn't discriminate, and neither does fire. And the important thing is about talking about this. If we know that there are 19 cancers recognized as linked to service in Manitoba, Manitoba has information that perhaps if we get everyone around the table to share, what information do you have, what research, which data? This is where we're going to start talking about prevention, understanding that in terms of decontamination, big city fire departments in Toronto have the resources for decontamination at the site of a fire. But when you are a volunteer firefighter and you keep your bunker gear in your car and you haven't decontaminated it, and that is the same trunk that you put your family groceries in, this is what I'm talking about. The pride we had when we were kids growing up, I used to remember putting my dad's boots on. The boots were covered in soot. Put on his bunker gear, his jacket, and would drag on the floor because I was so little. And firefighters took pride in how dirty their uniforms were, right? Because you worked harder. Today, that'd be unheard of because it's contaminated with toxic chemicals. And we know now that you need to wipe down. Don't get in the vehicle with your contaminated gear, because exposure is actually, through the skin, is probably more dangerous. Because you wear your CBSA, self-contained breathing apparatus, we're not breathing it in as much, but we're exposed to it. And that's what this is about bringing awareness through the designation of January as Firefighter Cancer Awareness Month, but also best practices, knowing please do not carry your bunker gear in your car. Change the hood after every fire. Don't wash your equipment in your family washing machine or in a public laundromat. Thank you. And that's what this is about. I learned so much in the course of researching this bill that I myself had no idea. And I remember at second hour of debate, at second reading, I said, one thing I'm really proud of is that there are now 338 members of Parliament representing every Canadian that now know that firefighting is a carcinogen profession. And when we talk to our firefighters in our respective ridings, we can make sure, are you aware? Do you know? Are you taking the proper precautions? And that's what this bill is about.
Thank you, Ms. Romanado. Suite, c'est le tour de Bloc québécois, Monsieur Champ.
Merci, Madame Romanado, d'être avec nous.
Thank you, Madame Romanado. And we spoke before the meeting. It is very peculiar to have this private members bill and to find ourselves in committee. But to date, I have to say that you are doing very well. I think that all the colleagues around the table.
I think all of the colleagues around our table admire firefighters, as do all of the colleagues here. As well, we do have a story to tell. We have an anecdote to tell about firefighters. And I don't want to turn this into a long and personal story, but I think all small boys and girls grew up by dreaming about being a firefighter or a police officer. It's something we have as a dream when we're children. That wasn't the case for me. It happened to me late. I had admiration for firefighters late. I worked as a sailor on a cruise board. And one day I was told that next Saturday we had to do a firefighting training session. It was very summary training. It has nothing to do with the detailed training that professional fighters undergo. But we did obtain that training. And that day, I understood what it meant. I had a little bit of a glimpse of what it meant to have to fight a fire. And of course, we were not in a house. We were there. And then I thought, my goodness, I understood the scope of this profession and this vocation, because I think it's more a vocation rather than a profession. And I admired it to this date. Then I worked in the media. I spent much of my career there. And every time there was an event where we had to collect money for a cause, there were firefighters who came. Every time a situation arose of urgency or need in the community, the firefighters were always the first to arrive. And I don't see how one cannot admire and recognize the women and men who are there to protect us. They'll always be there, and we need them. And I'm pleased that you addressed the issue of volunteer firefighters, because in Quebec, that's the vast majority of our firefighters. And I'm happy that you've addressed their concerns, more specifically, the fact that they often carry their equipment in their cars. And that's an important point I'd like to address. But on a lighter note to begin, I was wondering if you knew from the outset that your bill would attract so much attention and sympathy. Did you expect so much attention when you tabled this bill in the House? Thank you very much, Member Champoux. Honestly not. I really was surprised to see how much support I obtained in the House of Commons, but as well across Canada and even from the United States. People contacted me to say that, yes, we'd also like to talk about this. The fact that the profession of fighting fires contains risks. Often we say, yes, we know that it's possible that a firefighter might eventually get lung cancer due to the smoke. But the fact that there are a number of different cancers linked to service is there. But as I did research, I reached out to a number of firefighters across the board, And I was lucky to be able to work with the CIFF, the heads of firefighters, to get their advice. And I was very touched by this. People came to see me, and they talked about their private cases. This was private, like Mr. Lewis mentioned. Often men don't really want to speak about their injuries. They don't want to speak about their physical and especially their mental injuries. So it really touched me that people came to see me and they spoke to me about their personal situation, about their brothers and sisters that they've lost due to cancer. And when you started, is there something that you would have liked to add to this bill and that you didn't do because perhaps you felt it wasn't the right opportunity, that really wasn't part of your mandate? Are there things that we could add? For instance, there's a joint civil protection program in place that could perhaps boost equipment. Is that something that you would like us to add to the bill? Well, that really is a good point. And as I've mentioned, in this bill, there are a lot of tactics, that is, how to disseminate this information. Will there be a meeting between the provinces and territories and interested parties and organizations to compile all of the data, but also to identify what we need to do for prevention? This might be the beginning of a conversation to see whether or not we have all of the necessary equipment and tools in hand in order to prevent. So that's a conversation that needs to take place. But if you have suggestions, I'm here to listen. Well, I think everybody here is very happy to support this, and I'm sure that all the members of Parliament join me in that. Thank you so much.
Mr.
Alors ensuite, Monsieur Davis, vous avez 6 minutes. Alors merci, Monsieur le Président, je veux vous remercier. Merci d'avoir présenté cette loi lorsque le Parlement est à son meilleur. C'est lorsque l'on présente des lois qui vont vraiment faire une grande différence dans la vie des gens. Et je crois que
that might be an improvement. Probably would be.
All right. In your earpiece, are you getting French now? You're getting English? Okay. So I think the... OK, maintenant. Et maintenant.
do you hear now can you hear? Okay.
We'll restart the clock. Mr. Davies, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I was saying, Chair, I just wanted to thank you and congratulate you on this legislation. Again, Parliament is at its best when it's bringing forth legislation that will make a real difference in people's lives, and that everybody from all sides of the aisle recognize it. And so I know there's a million issues that you could have brought forward, and many important, but this one is a really critical one that I think we all look forward to passing as soon as possible. I had the good fortune of, from British Columbia, going through the firefighter training school for a day. Now, I always admired firefighters, but after that experience, I was a changed person. I was certainly a changed politician because I knew it was a tough job. I didn't know the full scope of that. Firefighters don't just put out fires. They have to deal with electric car accidents where there's complicated chemical and electrical stuff going on, downed wires during storms, difficult rescues in extraordinarily tight spaces, I found, accident response, and even overdose. Where I come from, Vancouver, even first response and overdose. So what I was amazed by is the vast degree of knowledge and experience and skill sets that they have to bring. They are true heroes, and I want to put that on the record. Unbelievably well-trained professionals who exhibit a high degree of knowledge and professionalism every day. The other thing, I've been fortunate to be on this committee for 7 years, since 2015, and one thing that has really come to dominate my thinking is the importance of prevention. I don't think we spend enough time on that in healthcare. We wait until people get sick, or we wait until people get hurt, and then we have a pretty good system for dealing with it. But I think we have to put way more money, time, and resources in preventing that in the first place. And before I get to some specifics, I do want to mention I am blessed by having the guidance and wisdom of some of the best firefighters in the country. Gord Ditchburn, Rob Weeks, Lee Lax, Dustin Bordeaux are all wonderful people in British Columbia who have played a significant role in this as members of Local 18, IAF Local 18, and I want to give them a shout out. They've told me that in the IAFF database, 84 BC professional firefighters have died from occupational cancers. And those are ones that have been recognized as being covered under WorkSafe BC. Interestingly, most of those cancers, 40%, are colon, brain, and lung. And there's many cancers, I understand, that are occupationally caused and where firefighters are at risk. And I think that significantly, maybe grossly, understates the extent of the real situation, because there are many more, I think, who have suffered from and maybe passed by cancer that are not caught by these statistics. Do you have any comment on that, Sherry, about the state of statistics right now? Are we capturing the extent of the problem in your view?
Thank you so much, and thank you for your support on this. I just want to clarify, when you mentioned, about bringing legislation and so on, this isn't about me. This is about people behind me right now and those like them. So you bring up a really good point, and when I was doing the research for this bill, I compared each jurisdiction, which cancers they recognize, to see if there were some commonalities. And it's interestingly enough, la province du Québec, il y a un cancer qui le...
In Quebec, we are the only province that sees this cancer.
It's laryngeal, so larynx. Quebec is the only province that recognizes it. So they have information that others don't. And it's by sharing that expertise. So if already BC or Manitoba recognizes 19, but they don't recognize larynx, so there's more out there.
Right. Well, I want to move a bit to a few other issues. One issue that I think is a square federal jurisdiction that is preventative too is the issue of toxic chemicals that are connected with flame retardants in furniture. And the NDP caucus wrote a letter to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change in 2021. And we know that these toxic chemicals commonly used as flame retardants in a wide variety of products, including upholstered furniture. They threaten the environment, coastal marine life, but they affect the human body, linked to numerous health problems such as cancer, particularly when they're combusted. And right now, one thing I'm just wondering about is, do you think we need to work together to get strong, enforceable regulations to get these dangerous chemicals out of products, including firefighters included in the classification of vulnerable populations when assessing chemical safety, and working together with firefighters, because if we can get those chemicals out of things like furniture, we can actually prevent some of these cancers as well. Do you have any sort of comment or thoughts on that issue?
Thank you so much. So actually, in August of 2021, the government announced exactly that firefighters are exposed to toxic substances, including harmful flame retardants. And as part of initiatives, the government is moving forward to have some of these chemicals banned. So I think that's an opportunity for cross-party support. But also in terms of updating the National Building Code, which was updated in, it was supposed to be updated in 2020, but due to the pandemic it was delayed. And one of those asks was also to make sure that we're looking at flame retardants in furniture and in buildings and so on and so forth. So there's definitely some work to be done there, and I look forward to working with you to see if we can get some of that done.
Mr. Davies.
Do I have any time?
Yep, that's time.
Thank you. Thank you,
Next
Sherry.
up, Mr. Steinley, please, for 5 minutes. Welcome to the committee, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Sherry, thank you very much for bringing this bill forward. I wasn't sure I was going to say very much, but I want to piggyback on a little bit of what Mr. Davies said. I meet with the Regina firefighters quite often, as more than most people do, because I have one at my supper table on holidays. My brother-in-law is a firefighter in Regina, so we have a lot of conversations around safety and some of the concerns he has. And some of the good union guys, I have conversations as well with Tyler Peckham And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about what their biggest concern is, and that is what Mr. Davies brought up, is flame retardant materials in the furnitures. And they tell stories about coming back from fires, and you wash off and you see all the black wash off in the showers, and then you still have the itch and the scratches, and lots of these firefighters have families at home, and they take that home with them, and their fear is rubbing off on their skin, onto their family, their kids, and it's a very big concern. And I read the 2021 August report. Could you give a bit of an update on what the process would be to get some of these chemicals out of furniture and make it less harmful for our brave firefighters to go into harm's way? Especially, is it through a Health Canada? Because I think that might be a part of this, and if there's an opportunity for Health Canada to weigh in and see and basically make sure that this is happening a bit quicker, because they know the harm that it is causing our firefighters.
So thank you so much. So first of all, please thank your brother-in-law for his service and the complete family, because as you know, when they serve, the whole family serves along with them. I think you've just brought up a great topic of study for this committee. This is a great idea, and maybe this could be something that the Health Committee looks into in terms of advancing the conversation about flame retardants used in Canada. I know California has some expertise in this field, and there's definitely some room for some research and working together to try to see if we can get this dealt with. But I think you bring up an absolutely great topic of study. Unfortunately, I only get one private member's bill, so.
Well, thank you very much. And a few of the other concerns, obviously, is I saw the map, and I was an MLA in Saskatchewan as well, and we did add some more cancers to the list when I was an MLA, and the firefighters continue to champion, and we'll try. It's the only thing Manitoba actually beats us in is this right now. So I would ask, for Manitoba, what are some of the ones that Manitoba has coverage of that the other provinces could have coverage, so we can go back home and talk to some of our colleagues in provincial legislatures to see how we could push them along and maybe make sure Manitoba isn't at the top of the heap, which is a good thing, but we should all try and get there so we can actually support and promote some of these cancers that should be covered by the provincial legislatures.
Great question.
Excellent question, and I'm glad I have my little trusty Excel sheet here. So Saskatchewan has recognized pretty much most of the same cancers as other provinces. Also, I want to just a special shout out, because one area that we are starting to see more and more of is female cancers in female firefighters. And we don't talk a lot about it because only about 10% of firefighters in Canada are female. But we are noticing there are about 8 provinces that actually recognize female cancers in firefighters that are elevated. So ovarian and sorry, I just want to make sure it's not breast cancer, but it's ovarian and cervical. So there's definitely work to be done there, and just knowing that a female firefighter is at a higher risk for these types of cancers, the awareness means that they can talk to their family practitioner and say, look, I'm a firefighter. I want to be screened for ovarian and cervical because I'm at a higher risk, and that's what we're talking about. It's about prevention. Go ahead.
I just want to one thing else on the record here. When I was meeting with our firefighters in Regina, and Mr. Davies talked about for a second, but one of the biggest things our men and women are doing are going to drug overdoses, and they're firefighters and they're first responders, and they're going to some of the houses 2-3 times in a night. Tyler told me about one house he visited, the same house, and gave knocks to 3 different people in the same house in the same night. And they're going through this, and just please, when we're talking about this and when it gets passed, is the mental health awareness that our first responders are going to is something that they take it home. They take the fire retardant material home with them, but they take this home with them as well. And we've got to keep that in mind when we have the Firefighter Awareness Month. It's a mental health situation as well. So thank you very much for all you're doing.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Steinley. Next, Dr. Hanley, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Sherry, for your work and for your advocacy, and Mr. Lewis as well, and all who have stood behind you, literally, or sat behind you, and maybe a shout out to all firefighters, volunteer and otherwise, in my own constituency of the Yukon and around the country. I have a few questions for you, and these are going to be a little off the cuff for you, as they are for me. But one of the, when we look at the Yukon, we see that actually they are one of the more inclusive jurisdictions. They were not the first to have legislation; they were the 8th. But I think through revisions in the Workers' Compensation Health and Safety Act, in 2021, several cancers were added, so they now have 19 cancers recognized as linked to firefighting. So what can we learn from what each jurisdiction has put in place to inform a national strategy?
Thank you, Sari, so much. And yes, Yukon is definitely leading the way in terms of recognition of cancers linked to fire service. So I think that's basically the part of this bill that's so important is if we know there are 19 cancers linked to firefighting and more, because there are other provinces that have details. In order to institute that at the provincial level, they had based it on research and science. So they have the information. And so bringing partners together at the table to say, look, this is how we based our decision on this. And also not only is about the recognition, but how can we mitigate the risk? What are the best practices in terms of those specific cancers that firefighters can be doing to make sure that they mitigate as much the risk as possible? So that's what this is about, is bringing together the stakeholders to say, what information do you have? Sharing it, and at the end of the day, the provinces and territories will decide what they would like to do in their own respective jurisdictions, but it's about bringing together the information, because even myself, when I was preparing for this bill, it was, pulling information from various resources, but imagine sharing it with the common cause and the common goal of saving lives.
Thanks, and a segue to that, and I forgot to set my timer, so I'll be relying on the chair here. But a segue to that will be, what would it mean to, for example, Yukon firefighters who already have pretty inclusive legislation in place to see a national framework?
Well, first of all, firefighting in Yukon is probably very different from downtown Toronto. It's also not the same in terms of climate change and the types of emergencies that may be in Longueuil, in my riding. So, as you said, more and more firefighters are responding to different kind of emergencies. They're more first responders than firefighters. So what would be beneficial is talking about what kind of calls are they responding to, what kind of exposure do those unique calls put to them, but also what are the increased risks. And it really is about the sharing of information in terms of prevention. And this is an ongoing study, right? Because we're seeing more and more what's happening, and we've just heard from Mr. Lewis about the possible link to Parkinson's. So, it's part of a larger conversation and a continuing conversation.
And on that note, and also picking up from Mr. Steinley's observations about mental health, it's really to address some of these other occupational hazards. So in this process of developing a national framework for cancers linked to firefighting, what else have you learned? What else can we do? I'll give you an example. In 2011, and this is public information, but the Tagish fire chief, Kurt Gantner, died at age 49 from a heart attack while driving the day after, the 24 hours after fighting a large house fire. And I think that brought to light the relationship between heart disease and smoke exposure and carbon monoxide exposure. But also, I think the importance, particularly for part-time and volunteer firefighters, of fitness, prevention, awareness to prevent some of these other occupational hazards, and as well as the stress, the mental health. There's another list. So I wonder if you could maybe comment on some of those aspects.
Actually, thank you so much. So when we were doing the compilation of the list of cancers, what we did is we read through all of the workmen's compensation for each province and territory. And while you see the numbers on the map, that is specific to cancers, but often in the same workmen's compensation legislation with respect to recognizing cancers, but many of them also list sudden heart attack. So those are all, there are many provinces already recognize that as an occupational death in terms of firefighting. Not all. While this bill is specific to cancer, there's a lot to be said about prevention, as you mentioned, but also good health, mental and physical health, because we can do research on, how many firefighters have high blood pressure or diabetes or other illnesses that may be contributed by the work that they do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hanley. Suite Monsieur Garon pour 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Caron, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I've just arrived. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome our colleague and salute everybody here. I'll be very frank with you. This bill has given me an opportunity to learn a great deal about the working conditions of firefighters as well as the risks that they face. I realized that I didn't know enough about this, and for that I'd like to thank you. Really, I think this is necessary work that is being done, and I commit to continue learning about the topic. I also understand with the answers that Dr. Hanley has given that prevention is something that concerns you greatly. And there's a broader aspect that moves beyond your bill that is vocational professions and the health of people in specific professions worries me a great deal. I was very surprised, however, to see what kind of equipment firefighters carry, that they have substances, and I'm trying to pronounce them, alkalis, polyfluides, etc. Hard to pronounce. These are toxic substances that firefighters actually carry on them. And don't you think that eventually it would be a good thing for the federal government to fund more research on decontamination and cleaning up the equipment of firefighters and to avoid cross-contamination after a fire? I think that's forward-looking, but is that not a possibility where Canada could eventually become a world leader? Thank you very much, Mr. Gaon, for your question. Yes, as we were conducting research for this bill, we noted the same reports regarding firefighting equipment and the links to toxic products that are on these equipment. So that's part of the conversation we're having. And everybody agrees on this to address the diseases and cancers, but prevention is still an issue. How can we prevent cancer? Is it a matter of the equipment? Is it about providing sufficient training, how to proceed? And earlier you weren't here, but we had a discussion on this. The fact that you will decontaminate after fire, but before you get into a vehicle, to see how important this is. In the past, my father never did this. His equipment was in the trunk of the car. He brought it home. Now we know that you should not do this. So it's a matter of identifying the problem and what the tactics are we can deploy and how we can prevent. That's part of the conversation that needs to be held. Thank you, Mr. Garot.
For 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm really glad, Sherry, you mentioned the National Building Code. I know it's outside the purview of your legislation, but I've been here for 14 years, and firefighters have been lobbying on this Hill every year for the last 14 years, and probably before that for enforceable national building standards, because, again, on a preventative measure, when we're building skyscrapers, when we're building homes, it has to be part of our structure and our culture that we design and use materials that have firefighter safety in mind, and I think we have a long way to go in that regard still. I want to just briefly speak for a minute about presumptive cancers. And get your feeling of where we're at on that. I know in BC, we cover, under Workers' Compensation Act, presumptive cancers for brain, bladder, colorectal, kidney, ureter, testicular, lung, esophageal, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and leukemia. And I think it's been extended a bit, and it's been extended, as you point out, to heart disease and certain mental health disorders. And I'm just wondering if you can give us a bit of a flavor nationally Who's got the best lists in the country, if you know? And, do you see a role for the federal government in sort of working with the provinces and territories to make sure that the best standard in this country becomes the floor standard in this country?
So as an MP from Quebec, it's hard for me to choose any province other than my own, but look, that's kind of the part of this bill, is about, look, who has what information? Can we bring everybody to the table and say, look, if you know that there are 19 and we think now 20, because we know Quebec has cancers that are linked that are not linked anywhere else in the country, is bringing that information together and letting provinces decide what they would like to do in their own respective province, but making sure they have the information. Not we all know it's there.
Yeah.
Let's not redouble our efforts, not redo the work. We know the information is there, the research is there. So as much as I'd like to give BC, I mean, they're at, I think, 18 now, but they're also one of the provinces that recognizes female cancers, and I can't emphasize that enough because this is something very emerging.
Aspect, yeah, I think that's an important part of it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Next, Dr. Ellis, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sherry, for being here. It's a pleasure to, as we get closer to Christmas, maybe we'll have something to celebrate, right? I think that's important. Certainly we do know, and I don't know around other regions, but in Nova Scotia at this time of year, there's a multitude of events and at local fire halls, so it's always great to get out and see the local firefighters. And I want you to know that across my riding in Nova Scotia, the firefighters are very thankful, and of course they're very aware of what's going on with this bill. And I think it means a lot to them, and I think has been pointed out very clearly to their families, which we can never forget. The other thing that I think that's very clear across the country, which is heartwarming, is that we do know that fire halls are the center of communities. And not just when things go sour. We know that that's an important thing. We saw that during Hurricane Fiona in Nova Scotia, that many fire halls were comfort centers, and even if they weren't a designated comfort center, because of the style of and type of quality of person that we attract to be a firefighter in a small community, that even if they're not designated as a comfort center, they're there anyway. They know that they have a great presence in their community. They're givers to all communities, and I think it's important to highlight that they are there whether they're necessarily formally asked to be or not. And I think that to highlight that is also very important. One of the things that I've had a long association with the Village of Bible Hill Fire Department, and it's been a great thing for me, and always a pleasure to serve them. One of the things that I do want to highlight, when I've gone to each of the fire halls over this season just before Christmas, is the number of medical first responder calls, and it would appear that certainly in my area of Nova Scotia, that it's taking up almost 50% of the call time for firefighters these days. And I guess, you know what, I'm very happy that we have this bill and we're talking about prevention. I guess I would like to hear your opinion with respect to medical first responder calls and the potential for prevention there, because I guess in my mind, we originally weren't asking firefighters to do that type of work. And so the preparation that might be required perhaps is not there. And of course, the treatment for, symptoms related to coming upon incredibly horrific scenes. So if you might comment on that, which I know is not totally related, but I know it's part of your heart. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and please thank your local firefighters for me. And a few of you have mentioned this, about the important service and community service that firefighters and fire halls play in all over this country. And whether it be, volunteering for Christmas basket donations or local funding and food drives and so on, firefighters do more than just put out fires, as you said. And there's a changing face of firefighting in Canada, whereas now we're seeing that actually putting what they call, water on fire is less and less of what they do. So when it comes to the changing face of firefighting, this bill is sort of, and Todd Doherty's bill are a bit of a blessing, and I don't want to say Todd Doherty's bill, it's a law, is a bit of a blessing and a curse, because with the increased awareness of PTSD in firefighting and cancers in firefighting also comes the difficulty in recruitment and retention. And I was talking to the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs about that reality, that people may not consider a career in firefighting because they're like, I don't want to get cancer, I don't want to have PTSD. And so with bringing out this awareness also brings out some challenges, but we can also say, well, with those challenges, we're doing something about it. So whether it be road to mental readiness, resiliency training that we see in the Canadian Armed Forces that many firefighters now and first responders are following, and or saying we recognize cancer in firefighting and we're doing something about it with this national framework to bring people around the table together to how do we prevent it. And I think that will alleviate some of the fears that people have in terms of considering a career in firefighting. And as our previous colleague had mentioned, that growing up, everyone wanted to be a firefighter or a police officer. Fortunately, nobody ever said I want to be a politician. So often, firefighters have a lot of respect in our community. And going through this bill, I have not had one person say to me, I don't think this is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis.
Chair, if I may get one more plug in, if we might think about the nomenclature around paid and volunteer firefighters, because let's be honest, they're all professionals. So thank you for the indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. The last round of questions are from Mr. Johari, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as you said, I'm the last person, and I'm going to ask for your indulgence, as well as my colleagues' indulgence today. Today is a very special day for me, and we'll get to that shortly. But I just want to start by congratulating and thanking Sherry. Often we say we are honored and privileged to represent our riding, but through this bill and through your advocacy, we, as the 338 members of this House, are truly honored and privileged to be able to represent 126,000 firefighters and their families, and on that note, most probably the whole Canada. So thank you very much. Quickly acknowledging the 189 members of the Richmond Hill Professional Fighter Association, Local 1957, led by Fire Chief Brian Burbridge and Tim Spark and Jeff Wazin, which is the secretary and the presidents of the IAF Local 1957. Every night or early morning when I arrive to Richmond Hill on my drive from Ottawa, as I turn from 404 to Highway 16, one of the very few lights that are on is my local firefighter station. And every morning, Monday morning, when I leave at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure that I'm here for 9 o'clock in the morning on Mondays, one of the few lights that are always on is the firefight stations, and I want to thank them. Indeed, they're in the heart of our community. But my experience with the firefighters is a bit different than fire, but indeed has to do with cancer and with the support that I received. Funny thing, today is 19 years that I lost my father, who was on palliative care and didn't survive the cancer. It was around 9:30 at night when I was sitting beside him that he fell to a heart attack. We called 911. And guess who was the first one at our door? The firefighters were the first one who came to our door. At that time, they immediately proceed to start with the resuscitation process. I later on noticed that they were in full contact with the paramedics who were driving to our house, who arrived probably 5 minutes after them, and the firefighters were there within a minute. And then we had the police because there was a death and it was in the home come probably about half an hour. When the paramedic arrived, the resuscitation process was handed to paramedic, but the firefighters did everything they could. And I can tell you that later on they provided all the supporting information around the circumstances of the passing of my father to the police, and they were very, very supportive. I can tell you this, I'll never forget that. They were the first one was in my house helping me, and they were the last one that they left my house. For that, I'm indebted to all firefighters, especially those firefighters who were there with me and with my family on that day. And I salute their family for supporting them every day and every night. As I'm celebrating the memory of my father, I would like to ask you, can you talk about the Memorial Grant Program that has been rolled out in 2018 and the impact that it has on this bill? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Majid, and thank you for sharing your story. And I think sharing it is exactly what makes this so special for me, is that I'm probably the luckiest MP in the House right now. I've got colleagues like you. All of you have supported me in this, and it's not about me. You can imagine what that says to the 126,000 firefighters across Canada, that they are seeing politicians come together regardless of whatever political stripe. We're all fighting for them. And I think they are the first ones in the House and the last ones to leave. So this is what they're asking us to be there for them, and that's what this is about. So I love the fact that you brought up the Memorial Grant Program, which was established in 2018. And what this provides is families of first responders, including firefighters, who die as a result of their duties with a one-time lump sum tax-free direct payment of $300,000. So the purpose of this grant for the program, it includes loss of life resulting from occupational illness attributable to employment. So how it works in terms of the criteria is that the presumptive list of occupational illness and related years of service based on established provincial and territorial practices is maintained. So what happens is, in terms of eligibility, the grant will look at the province of practice for that firefighter. And so depending on which cancers are part of the presumptive list, they would be eligible for this program. So obviously, as you saw from the map, there is no consistency among the provinces as to which cancers are recognized or linked to firefighting. So the program is applied unevenly currently across the country. So the research doesn't change, Majid, when we cross the borders into a different province. So hopefully, as part of this, we'll be looking at the Memorial Grant and seeing if it could be applied more evenly across the country.
Thank you, Ms. Romanado, and thank you, Mr. Johari. That takes us to the top of the hour. Ms. Romanado, thank you so much for being with us. It's evident that you've put your heart and soul and all of your professional talent into bringing this forward and preparing this, and you've also succeeded in doing something that only a few people can, and that is uniting people on all sides of the House. So congratulations and thank you. We will suspend. We will suspend for 3 minutes to allow Ms. Romanado to take her leave and Mr. Lake to get himself set up. Thank you. to we are back in session. Now I'd like to welcome Mr. Lake, who has joined us today to talk about Senate public bill that he is sponsoring in the House, S-203, an act respecting a federal framework on autism spectrum disorder. Mr. Lake, thank you so much for being with us. I know that it was actually on kind of short notice, but I also know this is your life's work, and you probably didn't need much notice. It's a pleasure and honor to have you here, and please take up to 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I appreciate the committee. For those of you that weren't here the other day, I subbed in on Tuesday and wound up presenting on Thursday. So was asked if I was ready, and after 15 years, yes, I'm ready. And it's kind of a metaphor because I probably could have been more ready. I probably could have prepared more for 2 months before a committee hearing, but that's kind of the nature where we're at with the National Autism Strategy too. There's been a lot of conversation over years and years and years and years and years. And we're never going to have unanimity on every single aspect of what would go into a national autism strategy. And at some point, you have to move forward with the knowledge that you have based on the the wisdom, the shared wisdom that we have across the country, and move forward in a way hopefully that's organic, that we're learning more every day through the process and hearing from more people and just getting better and better. And so that's kind of the spirit with which I come here. Just to dive into, I'll touch on the technical details quickly for a second of the bill, but largely what I'm looking forward to today, I hope, is just a conversation that we can all have. And I want people, I've had a couple of conversations on the side, I want people to feel comfortable just asking anything you want. I'm not an expert, I'm not a scientist, I'm not autistic myself, and there's folks who are scientists and folks who are autistic themselves that will share their stories over time, and I would encourage you to reach out and have those conversations. But I am the parent of a 27-year-old son with autism who was 10 when I was first elected, and who I learn from every single day. But the technical details, before I get into talking about Jayden, because I'll talk about Jayden a lot over the next 50 minutes or so. The technical details, this is a bill, it's a federal framework. It's called an Act Respecting a Federal Framework on Autism Spectrum Disorder. And really the bill itself is about accountability and timelines. So the bill doesn't lay out a national strategy. The bill is just putting some accountability. We've been having this conversation about a national strategy for years and years and years. And Senators Housakos and Beam really got together in a nonpartisan, sort of cross-partisan way and put forward an idea to put a framework around a timeline for establishing a national strategy, some basics around how we get there, and then also an accountability framework for how we evaluate how that strategy is working once we have it. And so it sort of charges the minister with some responsibility to meet those timelines. Now, the government at this point in time has signaled that we're going to have a national strategy within, I believe, I'm hoping by 2023 we'll have a national strategy in this country. And so really this is pushing to sort of build some accountability around that. A lot of times people will ask, and this will probably be largely a part of the conversation as we move forward, what is it that would be a part of a strategy? Maybe why is it taken so long? I think part of the challenge is just sort of finding that common ground. And we've had this conversation that's been seemingly interminable over all of the different aspects, and you have some pretty strong opinions on some things. But where I found the common ground in 15 years as we've had conversations really around it, and this is common almost around the world when you go around and have conversations, is the need for diagnosis and early diagnosis, the need for early help, call it therapy, treatment, intervention. There's always debate over terminology, and all of the words seem to have some debate over them. I like to think of just help that's needed. And then education and what the education system looks like for autistic Canadians. And then after the sort of early education, as someone moves into adult years, what does employment look like? What does housing look like? And then the sixth thing that I always reference in terms of an area where we find common ground as family members when we're talking about autism is what happens when we're gone as parents. You know, that is something that I guarantee you as family members, it seizes all of us, is what happens when we're not there? Who is going to care for your loved one the way that you cared for and supported your loved one? And I think a national strategy, and as we move forward, we're trying to get to a point where we've got a society that, you know, is loving and caring and helping in whatever way we can, whatever way the evidence base shows, to get us where we need to be. Now, I've got so many more notes here that I could reference. I'm just, you know, I'm a politician. Whatever you ask, I'm going to work what I want to say into the answers anyway. So, so let's just have a conversation, and hopefully, I love the conversations we've had so far. I love the conversation that happened before this one, where we're able to get around a table like this as members of Parliament from all parties, but more importantly, beyond our parties as human beings, sort of almost in a sense, setting aside political labels to have a conversation as human beings, trying to make our country a better place for people who not only need help, and I'll close my comments with this, not only need help, but also we get so focused on the help that we fail to realize that when we put the right system in place, there are unbelievable skills, abilities, and talents that we're going to unlock, unbelievable potential that we're going to unlock as we move forward that's going to make life better for all of us in this country. So with that, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. The conversation is going to begin with Dr. Ellis for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and through you to Mike. I really appreciate you being here. I know this is obviously a very personal, but has become a very public and now a national strategy. So I thank you for that. And very clearly, we know that when we have these significant differences across our great nation, you know, I think of a story from Nova Scotia where we had a plastic surgeon who had a child with autism spectrum disorder who chose to leave our province and actually go to Alberta because there were more supports there, a more well-defined framework. And I think that's tragic. It's tragic for families to have to consider doing those things. So thank you for doing this work. You know, one of the things I think about is, you know, obviously there are a multitude of people with disabilities who exist in Canada. And just to expand a bit on that, is it possible that a framework such as this, because the 6 points that you touched on, in my mind, would also be a useful framework for anybody who struggles with a disability, and maybe you can talk about the specifics of autism spectrum disorder, but actually, you know, is this an idea around disability, people with disabilities and families who support them in general? Thank you.
Yeah, so two comments. First of all, I'll point out that the legislation we're discussing right now, S203, one of the things it does is it lays out some measures to be provided. The framework must identify measures to provide, and it has a list. It's different than the list I said. You know, I explained my list based on what sort of my experience is. But one of the things I like about it is that in the, you know, while they went through the Senate process, they moved amendments to add at the end anything else that the minister considers appropriate in relation to autism spectrum disorder. Really important to do that. And then on the stakeholder side, they added a similar clause about consultations, anyone else that the minister considers appropriate. It's so important that this is organic, that we move forward in a way, because we've constantly learned over the decades, and we're going to be continuing to learn how to have these conversations. In Alberta, so Jaden was 2.5 years old when he started his autism program in 1998. In Alberta, one of the real strengths of the program, and it's different than in other places, is that it's a family support for children with disabilities. Broadly, it's not an autism-specific program in Alberta. So in Alberta, Jaden, you know, went through a multidisciplinary team review. Back then, they determined what his needs were, set a budget for that, and then we worked to find service providers who could meet his needs as assessed. It was a fantastic situation, and rightly, you point out that people moved from across the country to Alberta to access that level of support. I think what a national strategy does is it takes a look at the Alberta situation, the evidence about what works and doesn't work there and in every other jurisdiction in the country, and brings that knowledge base, that evidence, because there's things that other places do better than Alberta was doing. There's places that other countries will do better than we might be doing in any jurisdiction in Canada. You want a strategy, you want a system that is gathering the very best evidence from around the world and bringing it to Canada and then sharing it with the autism community, the disability community across the country. So governments in their jurisdiction can make the very best decisions that they can make based on the the evidence, the best evidence of the day, as we're constantly learning. And then here's the beautiful part about that is that as we do that and establish a world-class national autism strategy, we'll also be able to share to the world what it is that we're learning in Canada as we move forward. And one of the points that I'll make just in closing this answer is that while we have a long ways to go in Canada, we are a long ways ahead of where many places in the world are as well.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mike. I appreciate it. And again, through you, Chair, we realize that this is about individuals and families. However, I think it's maybe illustrative for folks, if you have some numbers, Mike, to talk about costs associated with perhaps even getting a child assessed who may have autism spectrum disorder and care costs, et cetera. I think it's important that Canadians understand how difficult this can become for families in terms of the financial difficulties experienced. Not to mention the other struggles that are associated. So if you have some of those, Mike, if you might share those, I'd appreciate it.
It's interesting because I can share a little bit about what the circumstance was for us. And every province, it's a little bit different right now. Back then, we were able to get a diagnosis within, I believe, a couple of months. That's not the case right now in Canada and most places. We were able to get Jaden the help that he needed within a month or two. That's not the case right now in most places in this country, and that time frame is so important. Jaden's program back then, this is $1998, I believe was in the neighborhood of about $70,000 a year for that program. You can, if you're going to be making the type of investments that we need to make in this area, you have to make sure that you're leaning on the very best evidence that we have available to us now. In 2022, the program in Alberta would be different than it was in 1998. We've learned a lot of things in terms of how we help people, and I'm sure in the rest of the conversation I can get to some of those points.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Dr. Pawlowski, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mike, for bringing this important legislation forward. You mentioned your concern and the concern of all parents of autistic kids, what's going to happen when I'm gone. So I think in this position in Parliament and with this bill, you have a rather unique opportunity to materially affect that, because this legislation will presumably outlive you. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask, what can the federal government do in order to ensure that services are maintained for autistic individuals when we know that most of healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction? And as you may or may not know, the Ford government in Ontario has been heavily criticized in that it drastically cut services for autistic children. Now, I don't expect you or want you to start criticizing Ford and the Ford government, but healthcare and this kind of funding is generally provincial. I think you would like to see and ensure that, for example, your child, when you're gone, continues to have those services. You've been a politician, a federal politician, for a fair bit. What can we, given the jurisdiction issue, do in order to try to ensure that autistic people across Canada continue to have those services?
So, listen, you touched on an important point. So my approach on working with governments, I'll point out this. So the reason Michael Coteau is seconding this bill from your side is because I've known him for a long time. I've known him for a long time because when the Wynne government was getting things wrong on autism, I reached out and helped them behind the scenes, just like I do with any provincial government of any stripe. What my experience, provincial governments always start on the autism file by getting it wrong, always. And my hope is that a national strategy helps to alleviate that situation, so that when a new government is elected, whatever the political stripe, that government has an evidence base that they can turn to, an expert base that they can turn to that includes autistic Canadians, includes researchers, the health community, families, and stakeholder groups, and a community that comes together finds a common ground and can communicate it in a way that makes sense to governments. Too often right now, governments come into a context we're coming into a context that's politically polarized in every way. But in the autism community, it can be hard to make sense of, what the evidence base actually is right now. And I think a national strategy would work to sort of bring that evidence base together. Here's the other thing I'll say about provincial governments broadly, though. Every one of them wants to get it right. And I've found that when I'm having conversations with them behind the scenes, and I tend to have those conversations behind the scenes and with an attitude towards helping, there is a real spirit of wanting to get it right. And this is what I'm hoping. This is where I think that a national strategy really comes into play in helping in that regard.
Thanks. And the second question is, in the cuts by the Ford government were to funding for services for children with autistic disorders. It would seem to me, and I've heard from some people, okay, there is often funding for children with autism, but how about when they become adults? Does that funding continue, and how much support are there for people, grown-up individuals with autism, particularly related to, for example, their job situation? That for everyone's a major part of life is having a job and keeping on with the job, and I think that would probably be harder when you have an autistic individual. And even furthermore, how much support is there for autistic people when they start to get older? So when you're young, even with your son in his 20s, he still has mom and dad around, family members, but how about in another 40, 50 years when you're not there? How much support is there for elderly people with autism?
There's a lot of questions worked into that one question, and I've been on this committee with you long enough to know this isn't the first time. You know what, Jade, there seems to have been a real focus on young people and early intervention and those kind of things, back in the sort of early 2000s. That wave where there was a real awareness of that is now moved into adulthood. And there was a point in time when we talked about people sort of almost falling off the cliff when they turned 18. That's a real experience for a lot of people. As we move forward, when we think about things like, so we talk a lot about inclusive education, right? And what that looks like. And getting inclusion right in education is important. But we're also talking a lot now about inclusive workplaces, inclusive housing. What does that look like? We are better off when we're surrounded by people who are different from us. When we're surrounded by the full diversity of humanity and of that range in Canada. And that doesn't just go with education. That goes in every way. I often say to people, and I said it in my speech in the House, when I'm surrounded by people who are exactly like me, then my weaknesses, there's no one to compensate for my weaknesses. And my strengths aren't strengths anymore because everybody around me has the same strengths I have, right? So this is a real question and a real opportunity for us as we move forward, is to sort of build a more inclusive society, not only in the school system, but in workplaces and in housing and beyond.
Mr. Lake, Monsieur Garon, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Garon, 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike, for joining us here on this side of the table today. Of course, there are always partisan lines, which are very much present in Parliament. Nevertheless, here we're encountering amazing people, and who for many years have been fighting against contrary winds for extraordinary causes, which have a great deal of value. And today we're welcoming two parliamentarians who are part of that category. There was Sherry, of course, who appeared today. And I just want to express all of my admiration for you and the work that you're doing. And that really comes from the heart. I took the time to have conversations with people who are caseworkers with families. I don't have any persons with autism in my own entourage, but there are two different workers who told me this. They said that the problem to ensure that we can integrate these people and enable them to fulfill everything is not about them. It's how they are seen, it's how they're treated, and it's all about their adaptability to us. So I'd like to hear you speak to that. And how does this play out in the actual real life of a family living with persons with autism?
That's a great observation. And when I think about conversations that I've had with people who have autism, autistic Canadians, autistic people from around the world, there are a couple things that come up. There's a conversation about, there's many things that come up, but a conversation around the inclusion piece, right? And then a conversation around autonomy, right? And the autonomy question was always tricky for me because Jayden, it's difficult to imagine Jayden fully autonomous because Jayden doesn't understand danger. So my son is very significantly affected. He's non-speaking. There's terminology that gets tricky for people, non-verbal, non-speaking, whatever terminology you use. Some people would say non-verbal. He's verbal. He's ba 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 ba. And when he's doing that, oftentimes it sounds silly, but I'll look him in the eyes and I'll go ba ba ba, and he'll go ba 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 ba. It's the most engaged he ever is with me at a personal level. I don't know what we're talking about, but he does. And it means something that we're having that conversation. But autonomy for Jayden, what I've been really challenged by self-advocates on is I walk away from those conversations. My first instinct is to say, well, Jayden can't be fully autonomous. I get a little bit defensive as a dad, I think, in a sense, right? But when I walk away from it, I think, but he could be so much more autonomous than he is. We can give him more choice in what it is that he wants to do. We need to learn to be patient with him. With Jayden, he's shorter than I am. I'll get down to his level. If he's sitting down, I'll sit down beside him and try and get down to his level. I have to read his skin tone, his facial expressions, his eyes when he's talking to me. Sometimes if he's nervous, he'll shake, but he'll never tell me how he's feeling. That's a really abstract communication, right? And so we really have to spend the time to really try to understand and be patient with him. One of the challenges with him is we will almost always, in our impatience, will almost always decide for him or try to guess what it is that he wants, when oftentimes if we just wait on him a little bit, he'll type it into his phone or he'll point to something. And there's times that he's trying to tell us something. He's ba, 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 and we're just like too busy trying to move on with things, get in the car, whatever it is, race away. And you realize that he's telling you, you forgot your iPhone back there, and he noticed it, and he's ba, 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 and you're kind of discounting what it is that he's saying, and he's got something he's trying to say. And we need more patience. And as we learn to communicate with Jayden, we learn how to better communicate with everybody else around us too. We become better for what we learn in that process. And these are things that I've learned from listening to self-advocates, listening to autistic Canadians talk about what life is like, or autistic people from around the world, that way too often are not listened to, even as we've been having conversations over the years on what to do to help people with autism. We haven't listened to people with autism as we're having those conversations.
I have a minute left, but I think my question might take a little bit more time. I do not want to get into the issue of federal provincial jurisdiction. I don't want that to be today's purpose, but there is the issue of jurisdiction. I'm asking a naive question. Let's say tomorrow morning, overnight you were to become premier of a province, and the province was to set an example for the rest. What would you do? Where would you begin?
I would recognize those areas that I've talked about with my own knowledge base. If I was the premier of a province, I would start by recognizing that you've got to take a look at the lifespan. So you got to talk about across the spectrum and across the lifespan, and deal with all of those things at the same time. And the ideas of inclusion and autonomy, they kind of cross-cut all of the different things that I was talking about. 6 main areas are not a big number of main areas. You got to recognize that if you get the diagnosis piece right, you're going to be helping people earlier. But this goes for anybody. In any of us, we're better off when we got help with things we were challenged with, or when we got reinforced on things that we were good at. We're better off when someone started early with us, right? It's no different. But then you're going to lead to better outcomes in the education system. You're going to lead to better outcomes in employment and in housing. And I think that probably where it starts is just making sure that you start by getting really good information from the community around you that includes autistic Canadians, includes experts, scientists, researchers, that includes families, and that you're having that conversation, but that you're not waiting for unanimity. The problem in Canada right now, everybody's waiting for unanimity, and you're never going to have it, and we've got to move. There's a lot of things we know work, and we got to move.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Mr. Davies, please, for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Mike, for not only being here today and sponsoring the bill, but for your many years of great work in this area. I think Mike and I share something. My youngest daughter has a developmental disability. It's not autism, but it's allowed me to experience many of the same things Mike has, and more importantly, I think it's allowed me the privilege of meeting people in the diverse needs community, and to be exposed to the love and skill and talent that is there. In the last election, the NDP committed to a national autism strategy. I know the Conservatives made a very strong election commitment in their 2021 platform. The Liberals provided $15.4 million over 2 years in the 2021 budget to create a national autism strategy, and S203 was adopted unanimously by the Senate at third reading on May 12, 2022. So there's a great consensus, I think, in Parliament among cross-party lines. So I'm really pleased to see this bill come forward. I've got some specific questions, Mike. What steps are you aware of that have been taken to seek input from the autistic community with respect to this legislation to date?
Okay, so there was the Public Health Agency just had a hearing, a 2-day session where there were many autistic people who were part of the panels. Way better than I've seen in the past. I know that the Canadian, which I'm going to make sure I get the name right, of the group that did the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences has been working for almost 2 years. They came out with I believe, a 400-plus page report in May that is going to be the foundation, I think, for moving forward where we are right now. And there was a lot of autistic input into that report. Again, more than there has been in the past. We're seeing some people with autism now who are researchers weighing in some of these conversations. In fact, during the committee study at the Senate, there was a researcher that has autism himself that weighed in and was a part of that consultation. In fact, there were several autistic Canadians who were part of the Senate hearings, if you take a look at the 2 days of hearings.
Thanks. Well, I know there were, I think, by my count, 13 witnesses that appeared before the Senate Standing Committee, and I think the result of that evidence was it improved the bill. I know one change that was inspired was the original bill in the preamble described autism as a lifelong neurodevelopmental impairing disorder, and it caused the Senate to take out the word impairing. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts, Mike, about the word disorder, and whether or not, because I know that there are elements in in autistic Canadians and in the autistic community that maybe don't share the view that it's a disorder, maybe it's a condition. Do you have any thoughts about the terminology used in the bill in that respect?
I generally avoid the word disorder myself. There was a lot of conversation. If you take a look at the testimony at the Senate, or if you take a look at the discussion around amendments at the Senate, you'll see there was significant discussion around the word disorder. They decided to leave it in the sense that it's a medical term that is actually defined. And so I think the feeling in general was that in terms of this particular bill, remembering this bill is not establishing the national strategy, the bill is to sort of set that accountability and timelines around. The argument I think that was made was we'll let the government, as they establish the strategy, they'll let autistic Canadians and stakeholders weigh in on those types of conversations. But it was a significant point of conversation during the hearings. I try and use the word just autism when I'm talking.
Me too.
And I will point out that the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorders Alliance, formerly known as that, recently changed their name to the Autism Alliance of Canada for that very reason.
Mike, you've touched on this, the incredible diversity across the spectrum. Again, you can have profound, nonverbal Canadians with autism, all the way to exceptionally gifted, highly verbal people, autistic Canadians. How do you see this strategy as being able to embrace that full diversity across the spectrum, and do you have any pointers or thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And again, I talk time and time again about getting out of this mentality that everybody with autism only needs to be helped and everyone without autism are the helpers. That is not the way the world works. And we are robbing ourselves of incredible potential in our country to solve some of the big problems that we're dealing with. We deal with in this committee, or we deal with in other committees, we deal with in government all the time. And, you know, if we get this right, you know, we cultivate skills and abilities that we're short of right now in our country. And so, you know, I think that there's a full range, and there's a very, very common saying that if you've met one person with autism, you met one person with autism, right? And there is a real range of diversity in skills. There are some, obviously, commonalities that sort of lead to a diagnosis. There's a reason that there's a diagnosis for it, and we could have conversations about that. But by and large, you know, the biggest thing is just the takeaway that there's a huge potential to getting this right.
Thank you, Mr. Lake.
Thank you.
Mr. Zimmer, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Mike, for being here, and thanks for that, laying the groundwork for just a conversation about this. And I've been here since 2011, and you've been here longer. But ever since I've been here, you've been talking about the needs for autism and really awareness, probably the most important thing. But then next backed up with, okay, now what? So what, diagnosis is one big part of that, but another part of that, so, you know, once you're diagnosed, then what, right? Parents, what do I do with this child of mine that I love that happens to have a part of, has autism along the spectrum at some sort, right? Whether you're high functioning or you're maybe lesser functioning. And I know you're dealing with this firsthand with your son, but and I really like what you're doing in the bill. But I think what matters to you and it matters to us is outcomes, right? It's all nice to have a nice, pretty bill with a bow on it, but you want it to function and you want it to work. So I'm just going to dig down into some of the terminology. Measures to be provided timely and equitable access. Financial support, support for caregivers, a national research network. And I know you're limited in what a private member's bill can actually do, so I know. But, you know, what does timely and equitable access mean? What does it mean to you is more my specific question. Financial support, what does that mean to you? Support for caregivers, what does that mean to you? And the National Research Network, what does that mean to you? And I'll end my preamble a little bit. I've seen what you've done even in BC, even in, you know, always being an advocate for funds for local provincial entities. But you've faced headwinds. I saw it in 2016, 2017. You know, you asked the government for about $20 million to fund really autism across the country and a network, and it didn't make it. It didn't make it into the budget. So I know it's this needs to be backed with some kind of action for this to work. So getting back to my questions, timely and equitable access, what does that mean? Financial support, what does that mean? And support for caregivers. That's just 3 simple questions. What does it mean to you?
Now I'm going to try and remember them as I go,
I'll
because you
give
worked
them
a
back
lot.
to you.
You worked a
Yeah.
lot in there, but
Yeah.
timely and equitable access is the easiest one, right? People are waiting way too long to get their start. In Jaden's case, we knew he had autism around the time he was 2, around his second birthday. He didn't get, in his case, and this was fast relative to where we are now, it took a few months before we were able to start a program with him. And that program completely changed his ability to communicate with us, completely changed his ability to understand the world, seemingly, our ability to connect with him. And we all know how important connection is to things like mental health and physical health, actually. And our connection level increased almost immediately, within weeks of him starting his program. And it increased. Of course, every young person is going to progress on a different path, but he, I believe, is much more able to connect with the world around him because of the help he got. If we waited for that, if that had taken too long, we know that there are windows where that help is going to be more effective, right? And if you take a look at diagnosis, there are adults that get diagnosed with autism now. They're in a different place on the spectrum, but there are adults who get diagnosed with autism who their life changes once they have a diagnosis and the understanding that comes with that diagnosis and a different form of help that may be available to them, again, to mitigate challenges and to help them to unlock potential. And so that's sort of what timely, and then the equitable part of it is, depending on where you live, the circumstances have been completely different across the country over time. And that's obviously a significant challenge. Now, on the jurisdictional question that Jean Denis was asking, I mean, I'm from Alberta, and jurisdictional issues are important to folks in Alberta as well. What BC is doing is different than what Alberta did, which is different than what Ontario is doing. And right now, if you talk to families in those provinces, most of them are often fighting for a continuation of the program that they're used to. Even though those programs are completely different in each of those places, they're fighting for a continuation, at least, and an extension of those programs to families that don't have the help in the first place. So equity is about, providing an evidence base so governments can make those decisions and hopefully people get the help that they need without, as Stephen was talking about, having to move halfway across the country to get that help.
So when that amount, because of 20 million roughly in 2017, what is that establishing this framework? If this is to be achieved and successfully achieved, and Mike sits back and says it worked, here it is and it's functioning. How much is it going to cost? What's your estimate? And I guess what is it going to look like? It's obvious in what you've laid out here what that looks like, but maybe just explain what the cost is going to be, because I think the government, and I was going to ask you too, are you confident that the money will follow this framework?
So there's no money attached to this specific proposal. And let's be clear, the work on this proposal, credit where credit's due. It's not my work. It's Senator Husakos, Senator Beam, and then the Senate committee who did great work at making some of the modifications that Don talked about. In terms of the cost of the programs across the country are largely borne by the provinces, right? A national autism strategy, the cost of a strategy relative to the cost of delivering those programs is very minimal compared to the cost. So what success looks like is that governments across the country, and not just provincial governments, there's decisions municipalities make, there's decisions that police forces make, there's decisions that a lot of people who make decisions in this country make that they need better evidence to make. And success to me looks like the strongest evidence base in the world made known to people who are making those decisions so they can make the best decision in whatever area there are, so that we have a better understanding in the justice system, in the mental health system, the education system. I believe the number still is in the 80s in terms of people with autism not being employed. That is a complete loss to us as a country, a complete negative for us as a country. Everybody has a contribution to make. Yeah. It's not just, I talk a lot in universities about moving from inclusion to contribution.
Yeah, right on.
Right? Everybody has a contribution to make, and we as a country are not enabling that because we're not taking the steps that we need to take. So that's, I guess, what success looks like.
I applaud you for your efforts, and I know you'll get it done. And it's you put your shoulder to the wheel, and it's been for however many years. I hope you arrive soon at your goal. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Mr. Vancouverton, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, Mike. It's nice to have you at HESA, as always. Thank you for your leadership on this and other files as well. But we've been friends since before I ever got involved in politics, and despite our small political differences, I don't know if I've ever said this in public or on the record before, but you've always been extremely encouraging. And when I called you and told you that I was considering running, you encouraged me to, knowing that I wouldn't be running with blue signs on lawns. You still encouraged me, so I want to thank you for that. And the reason that I called you back then was to talk about autism, and I'm on your fundraising emails, not your partisan ones, but the ones that I get for the organized fundraising you do with Jaden. And I've learned a lot through that and from you, including, at one time what people first terminology was all about and where we're at now, which is somewhat a little bit different than that. And I've really welcomed that. So thank you for bringing me along, helping me learn a little bit more. The other person in my life that I've learned a lot from, there's a couple, but and we've talked about our speech language pathologist partners before, Dawn and I, but Emily is doing a PhD on literacy, and she was engaged at a school board level as a speech language pathologist, assessing the needs of kids with a lot of diverse needs. And one of those the main one that she was working on was autism, and she helped me understand more fully that it's a spectrum, as has been described today. There are a lot of diverse needs within the autism community. And the other person that helped me realize that was a guy named Andrew Sabino, who's a good friend of mine in Milton. He has somewhat of a superpower as an autistic individual. He remembers everything. And he worked at No Frills until recently, and he remembered every SKU. He didn't have to look up anything. And it was the same when he banged on doors with me. He wouldn't have to write anything down. He'd be like, okay, are you ready? And he'd say what happened at 15 doors in a row and exactly the response that he got at each door, because he doesn't forget a thing. So what I wanted to ask you about a little bit was with respect to the homogeneity of how some governments treat autism supports. Obviously, Jaden and Andrew have completely different needs when it comes to how they're going to live their lives. And the underpinning aspect of that, and obviously that support will be provincial. According to Emily and other practitioners that I've spoken with, it turns out that people being assessed, or I won't just say youth, but autistic individuals tend to get a much better service when they come from wealthier families, because it's expensive service. And the cohort of individuals that she's most worried about, and a lot of researchers are most worried about, is youth in autistic families who are, from a socioeconomic background that they're not going to be able to afford that $70,000 worth of annual support for their families. So I'd like you to that, and I'd also like to know if the $15 million in budget 2021 to develop this strategy is adequate, and that's where I'll leave it with you.
Well, so $15 million to develop a strategy. We'll see what the budget for the strategy is. Hopefully in maybe budget 2023, we'll even see that. I don't know. I totally remember our first conversation, because I was in Katowice, Poland, and I got this phone call from you, and I didn't even know you had my number. I don't know that we'd actually really talked much other than at an event way back when we were in government. I would say we had a great conversation that night. And I say that night because it was, I think, 2 or 3 in the morning for me, and you had come across somebody in a nomination at a door, and you had some questions for me about autism, and you thought of reaching out to me, and I appreciate that. Hopefully the relationships we have as it relates to helping people in whatever world we're in transcend our politics, and I appreciated that conversation. It was a fairly long conversation, and we've had many conversations since then. Obviously, the income level, autism supports across the country should be funded by governments. The core autism supports, early intervention, the education system and what that looks like, inclusion in the education system, all of those things. You talked about the person that you know that has that is so fantastic in sort of work world or whatever the case is. Jaden, if you were to, there's a CTV National News, one of my favorite things, we use this video in our presentations. CTV National News came out and did a story when he was in his senior year of high school, in his grade 12 year. And Jaden had been included in a regular classroom with a full-time aide for his whole K to 12 schooling. And because he was included, these kids got a chance to see what he was good at. They remembered that he was good at times tables. He was always done his times tables. Spelling tests, he was 100% on his spelling tests. Anything visual, he's great at puzzles, word searches, those kind of things. So they started to try and figure out, okay, well, where could we include him? They included him in musical theater, and he was pretty surprisingly better than they thought he was going to be at learning some of the dance steps and things like that. He has a few motor issues, and that's a bit of a challenge. But then they started to think, okay, well, what would Jaden be good at? And they included him in the school library, working in the school library. And he's amazing. CTV did this report. It's on my Facebook page if anybody wants to see it. The 2 minutes of him, he's scanning the books in the computer systems, putting them on the shelves. He would be walking around with a pile of books that he'd had in order. He'd put them on the shelf way faster, running to put them on the shelves way faster than any of us would do that. And if he was running by a shelf, he would grab a book off the shelf that some kid put in the wrong place as he's walking by, and without skipping a beat, put it in the right place. And it would shock you, because we would completely underestimate him. No one would think that he would be that good at that type of thing. But he is. He's that good at it. And even to this day, you see him do a puzzle, and he's got his tongue out. He's super intense. He's just the systematic way that he does things like puzzles and those kind of things. There has got to be room in our society for someone like Jaden to contribute in those ways, right? We're going to have to mitigate a few things, because Jaden he's so excited in the library to put books away. If he's working in the public library, he'll run over a senior citizen with his cart because he's so excited to put the books away, right? And so, but you have to mitigate those things, right? So, but surely we can do that to take advantage of full potential. Can I know that your time's probably almost up, but I'll just take a quick second to give a shout out, because I've got a staff member back here, Courtney, who works in my office. She's on the autism spectrum, and she is amazing. She also works for the Canadian Association for Supported Employment, and works 22 and a half hours a week there. She works 6 hours a week in my office. She's got a master's in critical disability studies. Say it into the mic so it gets on the record, and she's invaluable, right? And she also, Dawn, speaks at many conferences as an autistic voice, coming from her perspective, which is a very different place than Jaden is on the autism spectrum. But, both have contributions to make if we just pay attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. We're gonna do two short rounds from Monsieur Garand and Mr. Davies before we wrap. So, Monsieur Garand, 2 minutes et demi.
Mr. Garand, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't exceed my 2.5 minutes. The rest is up to Mike. In the bill, under Section 3.1, we expect to see consultation that will lead to the final bill on autism. There's mention of consultations with the provinces, the Minister of Health. In my mind, this process appears quite ambitious given the context. I was wondering if you're confident in the minister's ability to deliver this framework in the 18 months that will follow the passing of the bill.
It's been a long road. One of my colleagues talked about 2017 and going down that road and having basically what would have led to a national strategy, a Canadian Autism Partnership, rejected in the budget in 2017. And so confidence is a tricky thing. I think we're in a different place today, though. I think we're in a place where the government has signaled that we're going to have a national strategy, right? There has been a 19-month study done by this Canadian Academy of I always get it wrong, but of Health Sciences. There we go, and led by people that I know and I think are absolutely capable of having, of guiding this discussion. So I think there is a lot of work that's been done. So it's not 18 months starting now. by any stretch. This is an accountability framework to make sure that it happens. I also have confidence in, and some people might say, why do you have confidence in ministers at the provincial level in health and children's services and education? I have confidence that there's a will to get this right. Clearly, we haven't got it completely right over the years, but I think that there is a will to get this right. But it takes leadership at the federal level, and that's what a national strategy is all about. And I think working together, I think we're going to get there this time around. And I'm so thankful that this bill's come forward to set an accountability framework around that.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Mr. Davies, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Two questions, Mike. One is, under the Canada Health Act, one of the principles is that every Canadian is supposed to have relatively equal access to quality services across the country. It's one of the core principles. But we know that, and I think you've touched on this, each province and territory offers autism diagnostic and support services that vary quite a bit in terms of supports and delays and disparities. How do you view that in terms of developing a national strategy and how we can ensure that autistic Canadians have relatively equal access to the supports that they may need?
That's a big question for a 2.5 minute time
You got 30
frame.
seconds.
Yeah. But so first off, recognizing that most provinces, no province deals with it exclusively in the health jurisdiction, right? It's education. So this is common, though, almost everywhere. And in the States, you see the same thing in other parts of the world. Health, education, children's services, and the ball gets tossed between them. Mm-hmm. I think that this is where that leadership piece comes in at the federal level and at the provincial level, is a recognition that that's the spirit of the Canada Health Act.
Can I interrupt you, Mike, and just ask, do you see then a role for federal money? Like, is the only way we're going to get progress in this if the federal government kicks in a significant amount of money to make the services actually real?
In areas, absolutely, but I think we've seen that in some places. Ready, Willing, and Able, for example, right? Yeah. The employment program that was started by Jim Flaherty, but has been continued by this government and renewed by this government, which is a partnership with Inclusion and now the Autism Alliance of Canada. Certainly, we haven't even touched on Indigenous communities in this country, and the federal government has a huge role to play. And I think that we've made progress with this last iteration of conversation around Indigenous communities and voices being heard in this. Conversations around military families, conversations around tax policy,
that's where I
the
was
justice
go next.
system. There are a lot of places.
I know I won't have time, but
yeah.
I was going to go into the issue of intersectionality, because autism intersects with many other identities like gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, culture, socioeconomic status, rural, urban, and so we've got a lot of work in front of us to.
But I will note that in the bill, it's mentioned in the bill, and I think that that's really important, is even though the bill doesn't lay out the strategy, the fact that it's mentioned in here and that they've left room to add other areas and where the conversation might go from here is really, really an important part of this.
Great place to end. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Dr. Hanley has asked for 10 seconds to thank you. I'll extend the courtesy to the other parties as well. Dr. Hanley, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted on the record to thank you, Mike, for your eloquent testimony today and for your advocacy.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Mr. Lake, go ahead, Mr. Zimmer.
No, and I, no, I obviously in my last minutes there spoke about this has been a long-term thing, Mike, and it's as a dad but also as a member of Parliament, a colleague of ours. Really applaud your efforts to just keep going on this, and again, I hope you get across the finish line sooner than later. But wish you all the best, and thank you for your efforts today. Yeah.
I appreciate the member of Parliament from the town I grew up in and the member of Parliament from my neighboring riding competing over the mic there. So thanks, everybody.
Mr. Lake, I had a classmate in law school who has an autistic son, and he did a TED Talk in 2014, and he also spent some time in public life. His name is Danny Graham. If you Google Danny Graham TEDx Talk, the title of his talk was "Those Least Like Us Have the Most to Teach Us." that theme came over and over and over, and as I listened to you provide your testimony, I couldn't help but to think of Danny's TED Talk, if you get a chance to Google it. Thank you so much. This is obviously something that you're very passionate about and extremely knowledgeable about, and your advocacy is extremely effective and compelling. So thank you, Mr. Davies.
Well, I just want to say thank you as well, and just say that I can't think of any parliamentarian better suited to sponsor this bill in the House of Commons, Mike. So thanks for that.
I'll just say thank you to all of you, because I had a chance to serve on this committee, and it's nice to come into a situation where I get nervous when I'm speaking, and it's weird to sit in this spot at the table. But I knew coming in that I was coming into a committee that, notwithstanding political labels, it's a committee that I've really enjoyed serving on when I've been here, and knew that we would have a great conversation. So thank you for the great questions.
The second last word goes to Monsieur Gallon.
Just to say that there are many, many people who are fighting for very good causes, but there are two types of persons: people who speak and others who act, and you're part of that second category. So all my respect for you. Thank you.
Meeting. We're adjourned.